On this week's ILTV Insider, we're tackling a deeply troubling trend, the growing normalization of the phrase, the Gaza genocide. Once an accusation, it's now being used as an accepted fact by academics, activists, and even journalists. What happens when language this charge becomes mainstream? How does it impact Israel's image, the Jewish people, and the global fight against anti-Semitism? Joining me to break it down are former member of Knesset Mossi Raz and former AP Regional Chief dperry. Together, we'll explore what's really behind this narrative, the media's role in shaping it, and how Israel can reclaim the truth before it's too late. So I want to jump right in and get started with you, Zan. This idea that Israel committed genocide. And I say that in quote marks because we don't know. Did Israel commit genocide? You'll have to answer that for me. But it's become very normalized. Academia, political activists, obviously, but even in the media. Did Israel commit genocide, and how did this happen?
Well, it is a complex question that in the end reduces a global historic cataclysm on all sides, that is the Gaza war, into a question of semantics. But semantics can be important. So this word genocide, it means something to a lot of people. And it is defined by the 1948 UN Genocide Convention. And that Genocide Convention speaks very clearly of the intent to destroy people in whole or in part. The interpretation of that can go a lot of different ways, but I do not think it applies to a situation where perhaps a lot of people died in the context of an intent to achieve other ends. And Israel's purpose in the war in Gaza was to destroy Hamas and to remove them as a governing and military entity in Gaza, and to recover the hostages, that all those who are dead and all those who are alive. You see very clearly that the minute those goals are achieved, Israel's willing to end the war. Therefore, it simply is not a genocide, but there has been a monumental global campaign to attach this word to Israel's actions, and that campaign has leveraged the fact that in the public at large around the world, there is great confusion about what I just said, and there's a general sense that a large-scale death is a genocide. Whereas, in fact, under the Genocide Convention, you can have a genocide where no one died, but there was an intent. So there's a total disconnect. So wouldn't you say
Hamas committed a genocide then, but Israel did not?
In my view, the October 7th action by Hamas was absolutely genocidal. Their goal was to kill as many Jews as they can. The Israeli action that killed many more Palestinians than Jews that were killed on October 7th was not genocidal because its goal was something else. There was a dual goal that did not include kill as many Palestinians as possible. Now, I'm not naive. There were people in Israel that actually would share that goal, but they were not running the government. God knows I am no fan of the Netanyahu government, but that was not the goal of the government. And therefore, I would argue, A, it's not a genocide, but B, in the public comprehension of that word, it might be seen as such if it's repeated enough times. Now notice, no one speaks of the Ukrainian genocide. It is a very, very rare word to use in history. And if it turns out that it ends up being routinely and casually applied to what happened in Gaza, because of the rarity of it, it has value. Scarcity has value. It will be very damaging for Israel.
So, Mossi, let me ask you, piggybacking on that, if Israel did not commit a genocide, then how did it become that the word is being applied to our actions? And what kind of impact is this going to have on the Jewish state? Why is there a double standard when it comes to Israel?
I'm not sure that there is double standard. I'm not sure about this term of genocide. This is something that is very juridically, and I don't want to I don't have enough knowledge in order to know. Probably you are right that this is not genocide. By the way, I'm not sure that what Hamas has done with all the crimes is genocide, but it's not my business to talk about that. It's crimes. The problem is, I think, that yes, there was intent even of some government, some ministers in the government, not of the government, not of the army, but there was intent, and even they were stupid enough to say that.
So Jews in the diaspora certainly are not making government decisions in Israel, may or may not support the policies of the state of Israel. And yet, what seems to happen is as Israel commits, quote-unquote, genocide in Gaza, this becomes mainstream, it's fueling these anti-Semitic tropes and putting the Jewish community at risk. Dan, can you talk about that?
There's no doubt that is so. I'm saying that the word genocide is very rarely applied in history. The Armenian genocide, the Turks are still denying it. The genocide of Jews, the Holocaust, the Germans are still paying for it. The Rwanda genocide, which is pretty much the only other one that's been accepted, is still a major thing, and movies are being made about it, and it still discredits the government of Rwanda, or part of it. It's a very dangerous label, and it will make it impossible for whoever is accused of such an action to navigate the world in a placid and normal fashion for many years and probably many decades, and that will apply also to their supporters. So if the Jews support Israel, then the world will see them as complicit. Imagine supporting the Nazis in 1956. You're not going to have a good time of it, okay? And therefore, it will absolutely be a booster rocket for anyone who has bad faith anti-Semitic intentions that have nothing to do with what Israel actually did or didn't do. Therefore, for the Jews in the world, unless they're prepared to disavow Israel because it will become a litmus test at all times for them, they need to get on board with the program of making sure that the events of the Gaza war are not labeled a genocide. Mossi says it's not our business, it's juridical, it's political. If it ends up being labeled a genocide, if it moves from accusations that Gaza was a genocide and that Israel should be charged with genocide to a routine and casual reference to the Gaza genocide, that will be devastating. But I have to note, I agree with Mossi. What happened in Gaza was not necessarily okay. It is conceivable that there were war crimes in Gaza. Of course, you could also argue that every war has war crimes. It could be, it may be that there are major war crimes.
And you could also argue that Hamas was using their people as human shields, and that Hamas committed
absolutely.
So many
but
issues
here's the
that
problem.
it almost was impossible to
But Hamas
fight.
is not acceptable anywhere.
Yeah.
Hamas is a terror organization.
Israel seeks to be acceptable. Look, let me say this. 20 years ago, I was the AP bureau chief in Israel and the chairman of the Foreign Press Association in Israel, Palestine. Okay, I remember during the second Intifada, you had, especially when it became kind of a war in the West Bank, you had a lot of actions that cost civilian lives or could have cost civilian lives. We had IDF spokesman people in our office, coming physically to our office, explaining everything they did, why they did it, why they minimized civilian casualties, whenever they didn't take an action. I remember a near assassination effort of Abdelaziz Rantisi, but they stopped because they found out his family was around, didn't want to kill 6 innocent people. And they made a point of telling us that was Israel knowing that it's under a magnifying lens today.
So what changed?
What changed is that you have this government in Israel that knows it stands accused of prolonging the war for political reasons, that knows that it stands accused in the media of bombing some cafe in Gaza where 20 people died, and it doesn't come out and say, this is untrue, or this is true and was a mistake, or here's why we did it anyway. Israel hasn't told its story. Now, I, like Mossi, suspect very strongly that part of the story is untellable.
So let me turn to Mossi for a minute, because I want to actually ask you.
They haven't even tried.
So then let me ask you this. We're about to open up Gaza within the next few weeks. There was a Supreme Court ruling. Reporters are going to re-enter, foreign press, re-enter Gaza very soon. We heard, Dan, what happened 20 years ago when the reporters went in. Today, the reporters are going to go into Gaza, and they are going to see 80% of Gaza flattened. What narrative should Israel prepare? What should Israel be doing right now? I mean, you're a politician. At least could you think Israel should spin it to ensure that this genocide narrative does not continue or does not be perpetuated?
First, I have to say that the fact that international media will go into Gaza will not change anything, because in the world they saw everything. They know that.
But it's different to see it with your own eyes.
Yes, I think, but there's so many pictures, and so many. We have social media, and people saw that.
Yes, we've seen social media, and yes, we've had reporting from inside Gaza, all by Palestinians, some working for foreign media, who you could reasonably claim are A, involved, and B, afraid of the Hamas. So there has been a degree of skepticism attached to the reporting of Gaza. Yeah, we've seen pictures of destruction.
Yeah, okay,
but you know what? We haven't seen a zoom out to really make an assessment. When professional journalists who are not involved and not afraid of Hamas go in, the reporting on what happened will have a lot more credibility. And Mayan is right. It will look terrible. So what needs to happen is Israel needs to figure out real fast why it did what it did, what is defensible, and then defend it. And they need to attack the genocide charge head on by really arguing persuasively. And it cannot be just Netanyahu, who at this point convinces no one. There has to be a concerted national effort by the government and the military to explain what they did, to apologize for what they did wrong, to maybe take a hit on things that are indefensible, and to present a picture of a reasonable country.
Most problematic place, the most risky place for Jews in the world right now is still here. Not in Europe, not in US, not in Canada, or not everywhere else. And this is a thing that we must change.
Do you agree with this and answer my question as well?
Look, if in the end the Gaza genocide becomes a thing that is routinely referenced, I think things will get very, very difficult for Israel, including for Israelis living abroad, and in particular, or traveling abroad, and in particular in Europe. For young Jews in America or UK or anywhere else today, there is a dilemma. I would hope that they continue to want to have association with Israel, whether or not it ends up being falsely accused of genocide. I would hope they forgive Israel for whatever emerges as some indisputable crime that might have happened in Gaza, which may be less than genocide, but may still be a crime. For Israelis, for Jews living abroad, by and large, the majority of Jews in the US, for example, they're not ultra-nationalistic and not attached to the ultra-right in Israel. There is a real dilemma because they cannot possibly support the Israel that will emerge from continued rule by the right-wing religious Haredi bloc. There is an apocalyptic war for the future, a political war for the future of Israel that is represented right now in a very acute way by the coming 2026 election. And if it goes in a direction of the right religious bloc, I think this will be the beginning of a divorce between Israel and the Jews of the U.S., by and large, with the exception...
Right after a time when unity was actually at its height.
Of the Orthodox, yes. It may be ironic, but that is where it's going to go. If the opposition wins that election, then a process of healing can begin that maybe will, in the end, even fix the problem, lead to a true partition from the Palestinians under a demilitarized Palestinian state or whatever it ends up being, whatever map it ends up being. But generally, Israel preserving and sustaining its democratic, liberal origins, and then it will be possible, I think, to slowly emerge from this darkness and reestablish the true partnership and even brotherhood and sisterhood with the Jews of the U.S. and
how
the world.
can the Jews of the diaspora help to debunk or to go against this genocide narrative? Is there something that could be happening abroad to help us?
Well, first of all, yeah, I think they should. I mean, if there's going to be a discussion, then they need to be part of that discussion. And it doesn't mean we justify everything Israel's done or even the Gaza war in general. It just means to understand the danger. If this genocide label ends up being attached as one of less than a half dozen in history, because it only began with the Armenian genocide, if it ends up being attached to Israel, they're in big trouble. They have to understand this and join the argument against it. Beyond that, if they want Israel to be a country that can potentially have good relations with the world, they have to get off the fence and understand that supporting Israel is not supporting the current government of Israel. The current government of Israel will lead Israel off a cliff and take many Jews with it.
And I want you to answer one question, 30 seconds, so literally stick to the time. Okay, Israel people are watching this show and they are going to, these are people who are going to be approached and told Israel has committed genocide in now 15 seconds. What do they need to respond? Give me an answer for them to tell those people.
Genocide is not a lot of people dying in the war. It is an intent to destroy a people. It is very rarely applied in history. It doesn't apply here. There is absolutely a double standard. No one speaks of the Russian genocide of Ukrainians. No one spoke of NATO genocide of Iraqis in Mosul and Syrians in Raqqa. There is absolutely a double standard that Israel is suffering from, and understanding that does not mean you support Netanyahu or support the way the war has been conducted.
Thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time today. What an interesting conversation. And really, let's hope for better days.